Hello and welcome to our ongoing series on COVID. From battling the pandemic, we have fortunately reached a post COVID phase. What is post COVID management? What are the risks? And what are the do's and don'ts? There are questions and more questions. In HT's talk show, The Interview, we have with us Dr. Romil Tikku, a much sought after physician. Welcome to the show, Dr. Tikku, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. My pleasure.
Now we hear of another term, which is long COVID. What is long COVID? What are the short and long-term effects? And what is the protocol?
See, basically acute COVID is when you have the illness to begin with, which lasts from 2 to 4 weeks. But what we are seeing is post 4 weeks also, patients are having symptoms which go on for quite some time. So from 4 to 12 weeks also you can have symptoms, and the most common symptoms are basically fatigue, breathlessness, chest pain, you can have headache, you can have dizziness, you can have brain fog, you can have altered sense of taste, smell, or anxiety, depression. You can have gastrointestinal symptoms like bloating, diarrhea, nausea, lack of appetite, insomnia. And this varies from patient to patient. Not everyone gets it, but at an average, we can say 10 to 40% of patients can get post-COVID symptoms. And if they last beyond 12 weeks, then it's called basically post-COVID syndrome. From 4 to 12 weeks, it's an ongoing symptomatic COVID. So anything which lasts 4 weeks onwards is basically long COVID, and nobody knows till how long it will go on. It might go on for 6 months or beyond that, up to a year, and hopefully not beyond that.
The list of symptoms which you gave is rather long, actually unending, and it somehow takes in everything. So what is the difference between COVID and long COVID?
Basically, COVID is an acute illness when you have flu-like symptoms. Most of the people, 80% of people will recover within 2 to 3 weeks. But if the recovery doesn't happen, you get complications sometimes, and the disease does prolong up to 4 weeks. But even after recovery, post 4 weeks, you can have these symptoms which I was talking about. And these are called long COVID symptoms. You don't have the acute illness, but it has left you with these symptoms. And there are many hypotheses regarding this. The virus itself affects all the systems, whether your heart, your lung, your kidney, your liver, all the organs in the body get affected. One could be that. The other could be the immune dysregulation happening post-COVID, leading to a persistent low-grade inflammatory state. And that, or a prothrombotic state. A lot of people get cardiac complications, heart events, stroke, pulmonary embolism, DVT, thrombosis, and all this is an ongoing inflammatory state. That is the reason why you land up with these chronic symptoms. But again, having said that, not everyone gets it, and no one knows who will get it, who will not get it. But it's basically to do with an immune dysregulation and the after effects of the acute infection. Acute infection, majority of the patients will recover, but 10 to 40%, on average, say 15, 20%, will develop such symptoms, which can go on for up to 6 months, maybe up to a year. But nobody knows, nobody can predict it.
You know, we have been hearing this term long COVID in the second surge. Do I take it that long COVID is a new term, or was it also there in the first phase?
No, it was there in the first phase also, because in the second phase, we've seen increasing number of patients falling sick, and the severity of the disease was also more in the second wave. So the number of patients having long COVID symptoms is more, but it was there earlier also. But this particular strain, the mutant strain or the Delta strain as it is called now, has led to increased severity of the disease also, though we need more data to back that. And because of which a lot of people have landed in the ICU, a lot of people needed oxygen, a lot of people have had lung issues. And that's why the post-COVID symptoms are also seen more in the second wave.
You spoke of the difference between COVID and long COVID. What is the difference between long COVID and post-COVID?
Post-COVID is basically part of the long COVID. See, as I said earlier, 2 to 4 weeks is what maximum it takes for you to recover from acute COVID. Post that is the long COVID, which can be ongoing symptomatic COVID up to 12 weeks. Beyond 12 weeks, it's called post-COVID syndrome. So everything beyond 4 weeks is long COVID, and it all depends on how long it will last. But having said that, there's no specific treatment for long COVID. So it's basically symptomatic treatment. But if you have fever, fever is also one of the symptoms, which I didn't mention earlier. So if you have fever, take paracetamol. If you have cough, take a cough syrup or your inhalers, nebulizers. If you are vulnerable, if you have hypertension, diabetes, just keep a check on your vitals. Most important is checking your sugars, your blood pressure, your oxygen saturation post-discharge also.
You said you forgot to add fever. I don't blame you because the list of symptoms is so long. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But let me ask you, what should and what is post-COVID management? What are the do's and don'ts?
Take it easy. Have a good diet, take enough rest, go with the expert advice, listen to what the doctors say. Don't do any self-medication. Don't do what your other family members who had COVID did. Don't go by hearsay or WhatsApp forwards. Go by scientific evidence. Go with what the experts say, because nobody knows what is your state. You might be different from the other person. It is so variable. So you might need something which the other person doesn't need. If fever is fever, we're seeing a lot of patients coming back with fever after recovery. It's some sort of immune dysregulation, some sort of antibody response, which is leading to a persistent inflammatory state. After recovery, 2-3 weeks down the line, they're coming back with high fever, elevated markers, inflammatory markers. And sometimes they might need a low-dose steroid. The doctor is the best judge.
After how long do COVID patients stop infecting others?
See, the infectivity period is about 10 days. If you haven't had symptoms for the last 3 days, and there was no fever, your oxygen levels are fine, you're breathing normally, then you are considered non-infectious. So we don't even test after 10 days. So there is no relevance of that negative test or positive, because sometimes you can have a false positive also after 10 days, because the test picks up the dead virus also, but that doesn't mean you're infectious to others. So on average, the infectivity period is 10 days. But in certain conditions, certain patients who have an ongoing active illness, immunocompromised patients, long ICU stay, you do have to repeat the PCR test. But in otherwise healthy people who had an uneventful recovery, 10 days is what we think is infectious. Post that, even at home, you don't need to be in isolation. But if you have vulnerable patients at home, in the family, somebody has diabetes, heart disease, cancer patients, better to wear a mask when you're in the vicinity and try to have those normal routine precautions which you take. But otherwise, infectivity is 10 days.
Which means after 10 days, everyone is safe. The person who is recovered from COVID, and he or she cannot infect the people around.
Yeah, exactly. After 10 days, you are not infectious to others.
Does COVID have anything to do with menstruation? Because lots of people are asking us that post-COVID, young girls and women are having excessive bleeding and sometimes periods twice in a month.
Well, I don't think there's a direct relation with COVID, but a lot of women tend to have these hormonal imbalances when they are stressed. And people who get COVID are anyway stressed, and that leads to hormonal imbalance. And hormonal imbalance can lead to delayed periods, irregular periods, excess bleeding, spotting, and that does tend to create such issues. But we don't have any data to say that COVID by itself leads to irregular periods or anything to do with menstrual periods. But again, we need more data on this. But because women have to take care of their house, they have to take care of their kids, some work from home. At the same time, if you have COVID itself is so depressing. Your morale goes down. And because of post-traumatic stress disorder, also sometimes you get menstrual irregularities. So I think that might be playing a part, the hormonal imbalance or the stress. But direct correlation, we don't have enough data to say that.
Many people are getting COVID twice. What is the period of immunity and for how long are they protected?
Well, not many people get reinfected again. It's a rare thing. For at least 3 months, you have some protection. But we have seen patients now getting reinfected. And according to a recent ICMR study, the percentage of reinfection was about 4.5%. So it's not that every other person who gets infected with COVID later on develops COVID again. But it's a rare thing, but it is a possibility. You don't have to be complacent. You have to keep doing COVID-appropriate behavior, wear a mask, maintain a distance, because there's a possibility that if not during the first 3 months, later on, you might get infected again if you don't take precautions. The immunity does last for at least 6 months. We don't have enough data on that, but there are recent studies which say that it can last up to 10 months, 11 months also. But because this virus hasn't been around for a long time, it's been there for a year almost, more than a year now, we need more data to say that. But at least 6 months to 1 year is what our assumption is.
While you say it is rare, I find many people saying we got it once and we've got it again.
See, but the proportion is not, the percentage of such patients is very less. But if you look at the overall figures, the numbers, the study does say that 4.5%. But yes, it is something, the mutant strains have led to reinfection, basically. See, earlier we didn't see too much of reinfections. But because of the mutant strains, this Delta strain, which we've seen first time in India, can lead to this immune escape, and the antibody is not working against this, and people who already had the infection getting reinfected again.
Post-COVID, when to exercise, how much to exercise, and when can one get back to pre-COVID fitness regimen?
Well, immediately post-COVID, you have to take it easy for at least 3 months, especially if you have cardiac issues, you're a diabetic, or you have chronic medical problems. So to begin with, 2 to 4 weeks later, you can start with a 10-15-minute walk. And it has to be done in a graded manner. Then you go to 30 minutes, and eventually maybe after 2-3 months, you increase it further and then go back to your normal routine. But immediately post-COVID, don't get into any kind of a rigorous exercise regimen. Don't go to the gym, don't do the treadmill, don't play that sport which increases your heart rate dramatically, because there are certain patients who had these cardiac events in the past. Some have lost their life also. So it has to be done in a more graded manner.
You know, on vaccination, there are conflicting versions. A GP says wait for 2 weeks. A cardiologist says wait for 6 weeks. Some say wait for 3 months. What is the ideal gap?
See, post-COVID infection, at least 3 months protection you anyway have because of the infection. So taking a jab before that might not help you much, because you already are protected and you have antibodies. Even if you don't have antibodies, you still have protection, because immunity is not only about the level of antibodies that you have. So the guidelines here say 3 months, and I would go with that, because even in US, the CDC says after 3 months, you should go for the jab. So I think 3 months gives you enough protection, unless you're immunocompromised or for some reason the doctor thinks that you need to take it before that. But by and large, 3 months seems to be a good interval.
Let me understand this. A person has taken the first jab, he or she gets COVID. Then are you saying there should be a 3-month gap before the second jab? Or are you saying someone who has not taken a jab and gets COVID then waits for 3 months?
Irrespective, if you had one jab and then post that, say 2 weeks down the line, you get COVID. So then again, this next jab you will take 3 months after you had the symptoms of COVID. And if you have not been vaccinated and if you got COVID, then again 3 months. So basically it's 3 months post the infection, irrespective of whether you've been vaccinated in the past with one jab or not.
Post-infection or post-recovery?
Post-infection.
Should one get tested for antibodies post-COVID and post-vaccination also?
Well, not really. It's not needed, because it doesn't really help you in any way. So post-vaccination, definitely not, because you've already been vaccinated. The level of antibodies doesn't really matter. The fact that you don't have a good level of antibodies or you have not generated a good antibody response doesn't mean that you don't have protection. So it's not needed routinely. And even post-infection, one doesn't really need it. It's only when you're in doubt or you don't know whether you had COVID or not, you had a typical COVID-like illness, the other family members were positive, but you were negative, and you want to check whether you really had, because that will help you to decide about your vaccination and things like that. So you do a COVID. So if your antibodies are positive, you know for sure that you had a COVID-like illness, you had COVID in the past, so that you can plan your vaccination. But routinely, it's not recommended. It doesn't really help. It's not going to change anything.
There have been cases where people have taken both the jabs and yet got COVID. So one question which is being asked is, are jabs protective or are they preventive?
See, even after getting 2 jabs, one can get COVID, because none of the vaccines are 100% efficacious. They're not foolproof. None of the vaccines in the world, for that matter. They can, these COVID vaccines, which have been given emergency use authorization, do help you in not getting the infection, but up to 80%, but 20% are still vulnerable. And there is no guarantee of that. You might still get infected. They do prevent the severe disease and death, or they do prevent you from getting hospitalized or getting into the ICU. That's for sure. The efficacy is very good regarding that. But there is no guarantee that you will not get the infection.
As of now, one is talking of 2 doses, taking 2 jabs. For how long are those effective? And because we are going to be living with COVID, so when should one repeat or go for the 3rd dose, or maybe go for a new vaccine if at the moment we have a limited choice? But next year, there would be more vaccines available. Can one switch from the vaccine one has taken the first time? What should be the gap? And what should be the protocol?
See, as of now, you don't need a 3rd booster. As of now, the recommendation is to go with the same vaccine that you had. Take the 2nd shot of the same vaccine. Mixing studies are being done regarding vaccines. There was a recent study in UK and Spain where they gave AstraZeneca followed by the Pfizer, and the response was good actually. But we need more studies on that, more data on that. Even in India now, we'll be doing studies where we're mixing those vaccines, and that will actually help us, because if you have to inoculate a large number of people, then you don't have to be dependent on one vaccine. Even if you have to give the other vaccine as a 2nd dose, it will work. So, but we need more data. And regarding the booster, Bharat Biotech is doing a study for the 3rd dose. But as of now, we don't know how long the immunity will last. It might last up to a year. That's our assumption. But we need more data, more studies. Maybe we'll need a booster like you need for flu every year. But as of now, there are no recommendations as such. So at least a year that's what we feel. But as and when we have more data, more studies are being done, we'll know whether we'll need a booster or not.
Which means that if one has taken both the jabs, one is protected for a year, because I was under the impression that one is protected for, say, 4 to 6 months.
We don't know. It could be 6 months. It could be 1 year. That's what I said. We need more studies on this, because that's why the studies are going on to see the booster dose, the antibodies. But it could be up to 1 year. It could be beyond that also. We don't know. We need more data. As of now, we can't clearly say that a particular vaccine gives you protection for this much time. There is not enough data to say that. We don't know the time frame. We'll know with time.
So, in the absence of data, is it advisable to take, just as a protective, to take a 3rd dose, maybe after 6 months, or would it be harmful if you take an extra dose?
It might not be harmful, but we have to go with the expert advice, with the recommendations, with the scientific evidence. There is no evidence right now to say that you need it. But if it's in the guidelines, if the studies show that you need a booster at some point, maybe not 6 months, maybe at 1 year, then we should go with it. But you don't have a choice in this. You have to go with what the government decides, what the health ministry, what the experts decide, depending on scientific evidence. It has to be based on scientific evidence and expert advice. It can't be based on what you think is right. So that's what we'll have to go with.
Dr. Tikku, there are lots of COVID myths going around. So let me pose some to you, and maybe you could explain or elaborate or contradict and tell us what is the truth and what is fact from myth. If you have strong immunity, you will not get COVID, is something which a lot of people are saying. Is that right?
Well, not really. Immunity does help you to fight the infections, but if you have a good immunity, doesn't mean that you won't get the infection, you won't get COVID.
While on masks, now it's being said, wear a double mask, wear a mask at home. What is the protocol? What should one do? What should one not do?
Well, one has to wear a mask. I would say that's the most important thing besides vaccination, because there's a lot of scientific evidence to say that the masks do prevent a lot of transmission of COVID-19 or the respiratory infections for that matter. And double masking is what one should do.
Wearing a mask outside homes, of course, is a given. But the recent studies or the recent thing is wear one at home as well. That's what I was asking.
Well, I don't think you need to do it as a routine at home. But if you have visitors coming home, if you have domestic workers or drivers, somebody who goes out and then comes in regularly at home, then you have to wear a mask, especially if you have elderly or vulnerable patients at home, somebody who has comorbidities, cardiac issues, diabetes. Otherwise, routinely, you don't need to.
How safe is it to order in food, or how safe are takeaways?
I think it's pretty safe to order food and takeaways also. When you go for a takeaway, you just have to follow the same precautions which you do. Otherwise, make sure that you're wearing a mask, make sure that maintaining a social distance. Once you come back home, take the proper precautions, wash your hands. And anyway, most of the food that we order is heated and or maybe cooked again, and then it's non-infectious. And anyway, you don't get COVID by eating food. So I would say it's quite safe. Even ordering food from outside is pretty safe.
Another thing which is being said is high temperatures can kill COVID infection. So take a hot water bath and drink a lot of hot water.
Well, not really. There is no evidence to say that. There's actually no scientific paper which says that taking a bath with hot water and things like that would give you any protection. No. Drinking hot water, taking steam, it doesn't really prevent you from getting any infection. In fact, there's a lot of stress on steam and taking steam. People are overdoing it 3-4 times a day. At the most, what it does is that it decongests your nose a little bit. If you have sinusitis, if you have a cold or a congested nose, and that's what it does. Besides that, it does nothing. It doesn't reach your lungs. You don't need it if you have COVID, actually. So taking hot water very frequently, taking steam 3-4 times a day is not what I would recommend, because there's no scientific evidence to say that it prevents infection.
What about popping in vitamin C, Zincovet, drinking green tea and giloy, or also eating garlic?
Well, to an extent, all these things might increase your immunity a little bit. But again, there is no scientific evidence to say that they can prevent you from getting COVID infection. In fact, there is not even enough evidence to say that they actually increase your immunity. So all these things cannot prevent you from getting COVID-19 infection. There is no treatment. There is nothing which can prevent you, no prevention as of now.
Even vitamin C and Zincovet, because people are popping in these pills routinely now.
No, there is no scientific evidence to say that they'll prevent infection.
My next two questions are the ones which may strike a chord with lots of people. One is drinking alcohol and smoking. How much or what relationship does drinking alcohol or smoking have to COVID?
Smoking is anyway out, and people who smoke should quit, because smoking has so many issues, health-related issues, that you have to quit. When it comes to alcohol, I mean, if you do it in moderation, it's still fine. But if you do binge drinking, and if you overdo it, then it can also suppress your immunity. It can damage your liver and can do lots of other things. So post-COVID, I would say, if you smoke, then you have to quit smoking. No questions about that. And regarding alcohol, limit your alcohol intake. Maybe 2 drinks a week, maximum 3, not beyond that.
Another thing which is being said are that steroids are the killer. Are they the villain of the piece, Dr. Tikku?
Well, not really. We have enough evidence to say that steroids are life-saving. In fact, the only drugs which are life-saving in COVID. And millions of people might have been saved because of steroids, but only when given for the right indication, in the right dose, for the right duration of time. Unfortunately, they're being misused or abused. So if you give it early enough in the disease, in COVID, in the first week, steroids can do more harm than good. They can increase the viral load, and it might mask your symptoms initially, but eventually you'll land up with a complication like pneumonia and respiratory failure. We've seen enough patients who've been on steroids from day one. And even in the recovery trial, which was done in UK, there was enough evidence to say that they reduce the mortality when given to patients who have pneumonia, ongoing respiratory distress, or who need oxygen. But when given it to those people who don't need oxygen, then it can actually increase the mortality. So given for the right indication, right amount of dose, duration, then it can do wonders. It can really save lives. And we have actually saved a lot of people using steroids.
You may not have an answer to this question, but I will still ask. What about the third wave? What is the possibility? And will it be as severe as the second surge? Or is there any hope for mankind?
Well, we might have a third wave at some point, but right now we can't really say when it will happen, if at all it happens. There is no evidence to say that right now. And the fact that children will be more vulnerable or they might have severe disease, we have no scientific evidence to say that. This virus is here to stay for a long time, maybe another year, 1.5 years. So we can't let our guard down. We have to keep doing what we are doing. Virus is evolving. You can have mutations again and you can have another spike. But if you ask me, my personal opinion is that we won't have such a devastating wave again.
Initially, what you said was very grim, but I'm glad you have ended on a positive note. Dr. Romil Tikku, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us and thank you for answering all the questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.